Oftentimes, the most daunting aspect of creating the change that you're wanting to see in your life, whether that be an entire life transformation, whether that be wanting to cut back or quit drinking, whether that be increasing your income or paying off debt or anything else, is just taking that initial step. And as somebody who has, over the past 6 years, transformed every single aspect of my life, I have met that resistance to starting so many times. And I can confidently say that I feel as though I found at least some sort of formula that helps me overcome that initial resistance to start to take the steps to get to be where I want to be. And if you've been feeling that as well, if you clicked on today's podcast episode and you're like, Kat, I have so much resistance to starting, know that you took that first step. You're here, you're listening to this, and together we are going to uncover this formula for you to see when you implement it into your life, if it's something that helps you break down that resistance as well, so that you can finally manifest that life that you're wanting to have and be the woman who gets to have it all, be it all, and do it all. So, on today's podcast episode, if it's not already clear, we are going to be talking about overcoming that resistance to start. And I'm going to give you a few personal examples from my life, as well as share how you can start to implement this in your life so that you can get to the place that you want to be. What's up, and welcome to the That's So Rich podcast, the show that's redefining wealth and helping you manifest a life that is rich in every single way. I'm your host, Kat Kozad, transformation coach, manifestation expert, and spiritual guide. And together, we're going to create your happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest life. I'm so happy you're here. Let's do this thing. What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of That's So Rich. I'm so excited for this podcast episode today for many reasons. One of those reasons being that this is the first podcast episode that I'm actually recording with a brand new microphone, and I'm actually recording with a video setup as well. So if you are wanting to actually watch the video clips behind this, I'm going to try to figure out how to get it on Spotify, but it's definitely going to be posted over on YouTube. And I'm going to be creating some Instagram reels out of this as well. So all of that to say, follow me on all the places so that you can see the podcast on video now. But the reason that we're actually moving over to video, and the video setup's going to get better and better. Right now, I literally just have my phone set up pointed at me across the room. And I'm like, LOL, this is so funny. Hopefully, one, it doesn't die. Two, it actually has me in frame. Three, the lighting is okay. Four, this works because I've never done it before. I did like a little tester taster of me just sitting and yapping on the couch the other night when I got the new microphone. But I feel so blessed. I feel so grateful. The reason that we're really making this transformation, one, is because I feel so inspired to up the game of the podcast in 2025 and beyond. I have such a beautiful vision for what That's So Rich can and will be. And I'm just so excited that y'all are here right now, getting in on the very initial bits of it, because I believe this podcast is going to take us some really incredible places. So that's the first reason. Second reason is because I was talking about the vision that I have for the podcast the other day at my co-working space. And here in New York City, I work out of a co-working space with a lot of other creative entrepreneurs. And I was just chatting with one of my really good friends down there. His name is Flavio. So Flavio, if you're listening to the podcast, hello, shout out to you. And he was like, okay, like, can I buy you a new microphone? Like, can I invest in the podcast? And I was like, excuse me, what, sir? Excuse me, who? He was like, yeah, like, I want to see you win. I want to see you grow. I want to see you like flourish. And I want to get in on the cat magic. Like, I want to be able to invest in the cat magic in this phase of your life, because I see where you're going and I know what's going to happen for you. And it was just so insane. Like, I still feel shocked, and I still feel just like overwhelming gratitude for the fact that it's not just me who sees this vision, and it's not just me who's in it doing it, and that I have a team of people behind me supporting me. And I think this ties really well into what we're going to be talking about here today on the podcast, because when I first started this podcast, I didn't have the resources that I have now. I didn't have the support that I have now. I didn't have the equipment that I have now. I didn't have any of this. And I'm still just in the phase of building it up to what I want it to be. And I'm going on my fourth year of having the podcast. And it's like, the initial step to get started, if I would have thought that I needed to have it all planned out, all figured out, all perfect before I started, then I may have never done so. But at the beginning, I just decided to take some really messy action. The first podcast episode, the first few podcast episodes are actually so funny to me when I go back and listen to them. I'm like trying not to cringe because I'm so proud of that version of me. But I also cringe a little bit because mainly just because of like the setup and the microphone that I had. I literally bought like the cheapest microphone off of Amazon because I was like, oh, that's good enough. And I got the microphone and it was so hard to get good sound quality. And I feel so grateful that my assistant at the time, she actually worked in sound engineering. So she knew a ton about what I needed to do to at least get good enough sound quality to be able to like publish the podcast. But I started with a janky ass microphone from Amazon and I literally would record the podcast episodes underneath a blanket. Like I would create a fort and put this blanket over myself and sit underneath this little man-made tent, this like self-made tent inside of my apartment and record the podcast episodes because that was the only way to get good audio quality. Whereas like now we got the video, we got the camera, or we got the microphone, and it's just going to get better and better. And so all of that to say, when you don't start, when there's this resistance to starting, I think that that's the most common thing that people experience that hold them back from actually having, being, and doing whatever it is that they want. Because we live in a time that while there's more resources than ever before, I think there's also a greater level of pressure than ever before to do it well, to be perfect, to do all the quote unquote right things in order for you to get the result that you want out of it. And there's been this almost like messy entrepreneurial spirit that has been lost. And it doesn't even have to be like entrepreneurial, just spirit in general of trying new things and messing up and failing and making mistakes and so on and so forth that just like keep people in the position that they're at because they don't want to do it wrong or they don't know how to do it or they're comparing themselves to other people right from the get-go. And it can be so harmful to the actual creative process and to that idea that is living inside of you. Like I'm such a firm believer, and if you've been here and been a part of the podcast over the past few years, you'll have heard me say this so many times, but I'm such a firm believer in the fact that the dreams that we have, the desires that we have, the ideas that we have, they're not there by mistake. They're not there as an accident. They're not there randomly. They're there because you divinely were meant to manifest them. They were divinely placed on your heart for you to be able to manifest them. And you wouldn't have the desire to manifest them in the first place if you didn't have the tools and resources inside of yourself to make that a reality. You may not have the tools, the resources, the things that you think you need externally right now, but you don't need those external things to take the first step that will get you to the place that you have them. And so that's what I want to talk about on today's podcast episode, because I look back at my journey and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I had an initial bit of resistance to. And I feel really grateful for the fact that I've always had just kind of this spirit that's like, fuck it, try it. And that's something that I feel as though I just get from like growing up. My mom tried so many things, my dad tried so many things, and there was never a narrative from them telling me like, Kika, don't do that, or no, we don't support that. My parents, every single thing that I've ever done, I feel so fucking grateful for this. They've supported me and they've been like, of course, if that's what you want to do it. And that didn't mean that they gave me the resources to be able to go do it because they themselves didn't have the resources, but they always were like, yeah, go ahead, do it. If that's what you want to do it. If you want to move to a new state, do it. If you want to buy a new car, do it. If you want to take out a $30,000 loan to go to coding school, even though you're never going to code another day in your life, do it. much. Maybe it could have been nice at some points if they told me no, but I'm actually so grateful for the fact that they didn't, because there's been so many things, like I said, that I had this initial resistance to starting, but ultimately got over that hump of resistance pretty quickly due to the formula that I'm going to be talking about in today's podcast episode and what I'm going to give to you guys, because I have seen it for myself and I've seen it for hundreds of women that I've worked with, that when you can overcome that initial hump of resistance, you are led to greater opportunities than you could have ever imagined. And that's what's been true for me. Just a few of the things that I had initial resistance to was quitting drinking. Quitting drinking was probably the one that I had the greatest resistance to, and it's been the thing that has given me the greatest reward in my entire life. Same with moving to New York City. I was so fucking scared to move to this city. I tried to talk myself out of it so many times, but taking step by step, just small movements to get myself here has been, again, one of the most incredible things that I've ever done. And it's changed my life in ways than I could have only ever imagined, and has brought me to more opportunity than I could have ever thought of. Same with making changes in my business. I had so much resistance to making changes in my business in 2023, and I literally put off making changes in my business all of 2023 until I got to the point of like, you know what, it just can't work this way. But there was so much fear, there was so much resistance that was keeping me in that place. And now on the other side of all of that, I'm like, oh my gosh, when we just get over that hump to starting, there's so much goodness that awaits you. There's so much goodness that has manifested into my life. Literally, honestly, sometimes just from the moment that I decide to do something, that I decide and I take that first step and not hold myself in this pattern of like, preparing, endlessly preparing. That's one of the things, and I promise you we're going to get into this formula in just a moment. One of the things that I see so clearly online, as well as just in my community and the conversations that I have with people, new people here in New York, is that there's this energy and this norm that has been created surrounding endlessly preparing for something, but never taking the actual action on it. And what I mean by that is, let's take manifestation, for example, with this. I'm lovingly calling you out if you are this person. You listen to all of the podcasts, you read all of the books, you read up on all of the things online that you possibly can to create the transformation that you're wanting to see in your life due to intentional manifestation, but you haven't actually embodied it yet, and you haven't taken the actions to then manifest what it is that you want into your life. It's almost like you've held yourself in this endless state of preparation for like, oh, well, when it happens or when XYZ comes together, then I have all the tools, I have all of the resources, but you haven't actually taken the first step, which is then putting this into practice, putting it into motion, and seeing it all come together for you. Same with people who are wanting to start a business. They will endlessly research on what equipment do they need, what kind of content do they need to post, what sort of business structure, what sort of payment plans, so on and so forth for their services or business or whatever it may be. And then they never get the LLC, or they never start sharing about their services and actually receiving that first client. And they wonder why they haven't gotten the result that they wanted to yet. And it's because you're endlessly preparing, but you're not actually taking that first step to start. It's one of the silliest ways that we can deceive ourselves into thinking that we're doing something, when in reality, we're not taking any sort of action that gets you closer to what it is that you want. You're not moving the needle forward. So with that being said, this process, I'm not talking about the endless preparation phase. I'm talking about doing it. I'm talking about like going out there and raw dogging life and making it fucking happen, because we can sit behind closed doors all day long, or we can even be out in the world and be endlessly preparing, saying the affirmations, doing the meditations, doing the things that you think you need to do to get the thing that you want. But until you actually take that action, it's not going to come together. And I want to be 110% honest about that because there's so much fluff, there's so much bullshit out there when it comes to manifestation that does not share that with you. But one thing that you must remember is that it's not just the universal law of attraction, it's also the universal law of action. It's this action that you must take to meet the universe, God, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, halfway in the process so that that divine energy can actually continue to support you. But when we just call on the universe all day long and then don't take any sort of action, I guarantee you there have been signs, there have been signals, there have been opportunities that have come up. And maybe at first they feel like a little feather, a little whisper, and maybe you hear them, but you kind of write them off. And then once you ignore the whisper, once you ignore that feather, it turns into something a little bit louder. Maybe something happens where it feels as though there's some sort of unfortunate circumstance or something that kind of like rattles you. And I like to see that as, I actually learned this from my friend Alan. I like to see that as the brick. Okay, so first it starts as the feather. It's gentle, it's whispering, it's nice, it's kind. And then when you continue to ignore the action that you need to take or what the universe is trying to guide you towards, it turns into a brick. You get smacked by that brick. Getting hit by a brick doesn't feel good, right? Then you ignore the brick and it turns into a Mack truck. It turns into a snowplow. It turns into a semi. And that thing mows you the fuck down. And that's where a lot of times people will experience like their rock bottom before they actually start to create some sort of change, myself included, completely guilty of that. They ignore the whispers over and over and over again until the Mack truck hits them. And so this is for all of you who have either been hit by the Mack truck and you're like, fuck, I don't want that to happen again. Or you haven't been hit by the Mack truck, but maybe you've felt those feathers, you felt those whispers. Maybe you've been hit by a brick or two. And you're like, oh yeah, we're not going to get hit by the Mack truck. And that's something I want to reiterate is like the fact that you don't have to get to rock bottom before you decide to make change. Rock bottom is a really incredible motivator, but it doesn't have to be the motivator for you to actually create the change that you're wanting to see in your life. So with that being said, there are, I think, 5, it may be 6, but 5 steps in this. And you don't have to follow them step by step. These are just like different things that I do to be able to lessen that resistance. And sometimes I do all of them, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just do a few of these things. So this is just for you to play with. This is for you to see how taking these resources, how taking these tools can help you lessening that resistance so that you can finally take that first step. Because I promise you, once you take that first step, the next step will appear. So first things first is creating internal safety. And if y'all have listened to the podcast episode, you know that this is one that I talk about all the time. And the reason I talk about it all the time is because, in my opinion, it's actually the most important piece of manifestation as a whole. What I mean by internal safety, creating internal safety, is you're creating a deep sense of safety and security inside of yourself, independent of what's happening externally from you. So when we are talking about taking the first step, when we are talking about releasing that resistance to starting, oftentimes the reason that you are not taking that first step, the reason that you are not starting is because you do not subconsciously or internally feel safe enough to do so. And because you do not feel safe enough internally to do so, you then create these really awesome protection mechanisms where you will procrastinate, where you will self-sabotage, where you will avoid it like the plague, where you will do all kinds of things and wonder why, because consciously you're like, oh, but like, I really want to do that thing. I really want to start the business. I really want to pay off the debt. I really want to start dating again. I really want to limit my alcohol intake, whatever it is. I really want to do that. Why am I not doing it? It's like this confusion sets in for yourself of like, oh, I know I want to do that thing, but like, why am I not doing it? It's because subconsciously, you're not feeling safe enough to do so. Internally, you're not feeling safe enough to do so. So that's where the resistance kicks in. And that's where you stop yourself from doing it. And so the reason internal safety is so important is because when you can start to establish that sense of internal safety inside of yourself, it releases that subconscious fear that has been holding you in those patterns of procrastination or avoidance or whatever it may be. And it helps you start to take that first step. So, one of the things that I will notice for myself is if there's any sort of resistance to doing something, again, oftentimes it's coming because I don't feel safe. Let's take, for example, this podcast. I had a hard time getting set up today. I told myself I was going to record this at like noon today. It's 3 p.m. So it took me 3 additional hours to get sitting here recording this podcast. And when I sat with myself and I was like, hey, Kat, what are you freaking out about? Like, what's the fear here that is holding you back from recording this podcast episode? And it was that this is a new setup. This is different for me. I have a camera pointing at me now. Whoa, weird. Don't like it. Just kidding. It's fine. It's just my phone pointing at me. I've gotten pretty good at my phone pointing at me, but this is different. This is different than what I'm used to, and because it's different than what I am used to, there's the unknown, and anything that is in the unknown, we have some sort of fear surrounding because we don't have evidence of it yet. And so therefore, there's a lack of safety. So I just tapped into some of the other things that we're going to be talking about, but that sense of safety inside of myself of like, oh, it's okay. Like, I know how to do this. I know how to set up and sit with a microphone on my couch. I know how to set up my camera over on the other side of the room. Like, I know how to do this. And so taking that beyond that, because while that may seem like a small example, that's actually for so many people, whether it be recording the Instagram reel or the Instagram story or sending that text message, sending that email, that's sometimes literally the first step. And we avoid it, we avoid it, we avoid it, we avoid it because there's the resistance to starting. So create that sense of safety inside of yourself. But also another example, this is one that I want to consistently talk about with each of these examples, was when I had so much resistance to paying off the $70,000 worth of debt that I had at the beginning of my intentional manifestation journey. I didn't even know that I had $70,000 worth of debt because I had the resistance to even looking at my bank account. So creating a sense of safety surrounding it's okay to look at your bank account, because for so many of us, especially when we're talking about money, there are so many fears, there are so many doubts, there are so many limiting beliefs that are holding us back from actually doing what it is that we want to do financially, whether that be increase your income or pay off the debt or create a savings account or just learn more about financial literacy. There's so much fear surrounding money due to familial trauma with it, due to societal trauma with it, due to past experiences that you've had with money that maybe didn't feel so good. And because of that, especially when it comes to our finances, a lot of the times we don't have that sense of safety. And that's the reason that you are not starting to create a different story with your finances. So if that resonates with you, know that creating internal safety not only is going to be so important for you in getting started with creating a change inside of your finances, but it also is literally the key to more money manifestation. So that is your first area to check out. If you are feeling resistance to getting started, it's time to create internal safety. It's time to connect to that deeper sense of safety inside of yourself. And if you're like, okay, Kat, that sounds all well and great, but how the hell do I actually do that? There's a few resources that I have for you on this one. First one is I recorded a full podcast episode about this. I'll link it down below in the show notes so that you can go listen to that one after this one and understand how to start to create that deep sense of safety inside of yourself. But the second thing that I want to say is that this is hands down, like I said, the most important aspect of manifestation. And for that reason, and for the fact that it's oftentimes one of the things that we have the biggest challenge untangling by ourselves, this is one of the top things that we can help you with inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, which is my signature online manifestation program that was specifically designed to help you release any fears, doubts, traumas, or energy blockages from the past that have been holding you back from manifesting more money, freedom, and fulfillment so that you can finally live that life that you've been wanting to without having to work so damn hard for it and without it being this uphill battle to get there. The Abundant AF Babe Academy has been what I've done in my life to manifest my dream life. And it's also been the process that I have taken now over 500 women through. So this shit works is what I'm saying. And it is so incredible to see continually after years and years of running this program, the fact that what I teach inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy is the core of what you need to live a happier, healthier, and wealthier life. So if you're interested in not only getting started, that would be a beautiful first step, but then manifesting all of these things that you desire in your finances, in your relationships, in your careers or businesses, in your personal life, in your connection to yourself and the universe or God, the Abundant AF Babe Academy was made for you. So you can also click the link down below in the show notes. There's going to be a link to apply to the Abundant AF Babe Academy down there. I'm currently enrolling for February. So if you are interested in finally receiving the support that you desire to take your life to the next level, fill out the application down below and we can have a conversation to make sure that this is a perfect fit for you. Alrighty, with that being said, our next step of this process, and again, you don't have to follow it step by step, but the second thing that I like to do is make sure that I'm breaking it down step by step, small bite-sized pieces, as opposed to feeling as though that I need the entire plan of how I'm going to execute something. And the reason for this being is because oftentimes when you're starting something, you think you need the entire game plan. You think you need from point A to point Z in order for you to get going, when in reality, point A to point Z is going to look so different than you think it's going to. I would love to know, and I wish that I could just do these podcasts in a room with you guys and talk to you and actually interact with you as I'm doing these podcasts, because I would love to see a show of hands of how many of you have created an entire plan just to then be like, oh, that plan literally got derailed after point B. I got from point A to point B and then fuck, it did not go the way that I thought it was going to, but it did get me somewhere and it got me perhaps even better than where you thought you could get to on your own. And for that reason, I am a firm believer in the fact that you do not need a plan for anything. Oftentimes, this is actually so funny. A lot of guys on dating apps like to ask me what my 5-year plan is. And I'm like, baby boy, I don't even know what my 6-month plan is. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 6 months' time. I'm taking it day by day. I'm taking it step by step, because anytime that I try to create a plan for myself, I know that I can execute it. I know I can follow it incredibly well, but it never goes the way that I think it's going to. And I can either really limit myself because there is a much greater plan that God has for me, or I can wildly overestimate what I think is going to happen. And then the ego can take control and make me feel as though I didn't do a good enough job. Whereas I've learned over the past few years that the most powerful thing that you can do for yourself, or that I do for myself, is instead of seeing it as I need to execute this entire plan, it's more so I'm going to take one step and I'm going to see where that step takes me. And then once I take that step, I trust that the next step is going to appear. And that's where you get really good as well at breaking down the resistance to taking steps, because you notice that as you take one step, the next always appears. It always appears. The path illuminates itself for you. And it's not this entire process of you trying to figure it out all on your own. And if you know me, you know I'm a firm believer in the fact that God is constantly guiding, loving, and supporting us on our journeys. And this is where you allow God to actually show you a much greater plan for your life than the one that you have for yourself. Because us humans, we are so limited in the way in which we perceive things because it's all based on our past experiences or what we've noticed that can be completely false based off of somebody else's experience. And so when you try to create your own plan, again, you limit yourself and oftentimes you really overwhelm yourself. So, letting go the need to have it all figured out and more so stepping into this place of taking it step by step. I know for myself, again, going back to the debt-free journey, when I first was deciding that I was like, okay, I'm ready. I actually want to take this by the horns. I actually am ready to pay off all of this debt. That first step, like I said, was literally just adding up all the debt that I had because I did not know that I was $70,000 in debt. And once I realized that, I was freaked out. So there was a lot of creating that deep internal safety, like I was talking about before, that came into place. But then once I knew how much debt that I had, once I knew that I was $70,000 in debt, I then was able to formulate, okay, this credit card, let's say, I can't remember exactly how much it was. I think it was around $3,000 on that credit card. I was like, okay, this is the first credit card to go. We're going to pay off that $3,000 credit card. And then once that $3,000 credit card was paid off, then it was, okay, let's move on to the next one. I think the next debt I paid off was like $17,000. It was the remainder of my coding school debt. I can't exactly remember numbers either, but once I paid off that 17,000, that was 20,000 of the 70,000 paid off, $50,000 left. And I took the rest of that journey just like that. It was step by step by step by step by step. It wasn't manifesting a whole windfall of money in one swoop swept step, swoop swept step to be able to then pay off the debt. It was, let's break it up into bite-sized pieces because bite-sized pieces are a lot easy to chew than sticking the entire steak in your mouth. Sorry to all my vegan friends out there, but you get my drift. It's a lot easier to chew bite by bite than it is to try and shove the entire meal in your mouth and digest that. So breaking it up into bite-sized pieces and taking that first bite-sized step breaks down the resistance to be able to continue to move forward, which then leads us onto our next point, which is making it fun or enjoyable in some sort of way. So when we are talking about the subconscious mind, when we are talking about that resistance, that fear that you have to getting started, which is creating the prolongment of starting in the first place, the reason that happens is because there's a level of discomfort associated to it. So when you are wanting to break down the resistance to getting started, one of the quickest and easiest ways that you can break down that resistance is by making it fun in some sort of way. So for me, like I was talking about earlier, I had resistance to getting started today. I didn't want to record this podcast episode because of the camera and the new setup. And instead of allowing that to happen and letting the ego thoughts win that were like, oh, Kat, you can just record it tomorrow. I'm like, bitch, no, I have things to do tomorrow that I have already decided that I am doing, and I am keeping the promises that I am keeping to myself. Instead of doing that, I'm going to make it fun. What am I going to do to make it fun? So I got my little setup all good and cute and cozy. I did a little dance party before I started this podcast episode. I have my favorite cup of tea sitting next to me. All of those things are enjoyable to me, and all of those things eased the discomfort and the resistance that I had to recording this podcast episode. So for you, how can you make it enjoyable? What are the things that you can bring to this situation that are going to take it from an uncomfortable experience? And hey, maybe it's still going to be uncomfortable in some sort of way, but how can you take it from this uncomfortable experience to something that you actually could look back on and you're like, I don't want to admit that I enjoyed that, but I really did. And so again, taking the example of paying off debt, for me, when I was paying off that $70,000 worth of debt, it was so uncomfortable at first to finally start to address my finances and finally start to look at what was happening. But I started to have money dates. I called them Finance Fridays. Finance Fridays were me having a date with my money where I would sit down and I would look at all that's going in, all that's going out, all of the debt that was there, all of the different things that I had going on inside of my finances. And I would light a candle. I would put on vibey music, something mellow in the background. I would grab my favorite drink and I would make a moment out of it. It was like taking yourself on a date or having somebody take you on a date, that enjoyable, just like, good feeling that you get from that experience. The same is available to you in the things that bring you discomfort, such as money, such as paying off debt. So, starting to create that sense of enjoyment in it is one of the best hacks that you have to release that subconscious discomfort and resistance that you're experiencing towards something so that you can start to move forward with it. Same true with if you have been thinking about removing or releasing alcohol from your life. How can you make it fun to get rid of the booze? Go get some yummy mocktails. Y'all should see my cabinets over there. They are stacked with mocktails. Luckily, most of those mocktails have come from companies that have just sent me so much free product over the past few months, which I'm just like, wow, that's also such a cool manifestation. But when I first stopped drinking, I would go out to places and I had so much fun asking them what alcohol-free options that they had and trying new alcohol-free options. So there's enjoyment in the experience like that. Same with if you are starting a business and there's so much fear, there's so much resistance surrounding starting the business. How can you make it enjoyable to show up and create, show up and share your message, show up and post the Instagram reel or whatever it is that you have resistance towards right now? Make it fun. One of the things that I love to think about with that is I often think about my 80-year-old self, wherever she is and whatever she's doing. She's looking back on this version of me and she's like, oh, Kat, have fun. Like, have fun. Be young, be silly, be your authentic self. Don't take life so goddamn seriously. And so I encourage you to take that as well as like, if there's any part of you that's like, ugh, this resistance to this thing and it's not fun for me to do it. Okay, what would your 80-year-old self do to make it fun? Because I guarantee you that chick is cool as hell and she had a lot of fun in her life. Which then leads us to our next one, which also taps into the pleasure of taking that first step and releasing the resistance towards taking steps, which is creating a reward system. So I am a firm believer in the little sweet treat reward system or in the little treat reward system in general, whether it's a sweet treat or just a treat in general, for more reasons than it's just fun to have something that you're treating yourself to. But because when you are doing something, again, that subconsciously you have resistance towards, you create that sense of safety surrounding, you take action on, and you accomplish, you are creating a new neural pathway inside of the subconscious mind. And when you then reinforce that with something enjoyable or positive or that makes you feel good, then you are creating positive reinforcement for yourself. You're almost training yourself like a dog, which sounds weird. And I promise that's not like the meaning that I'm giving to it. But if you have a dog, you know that dogs actually do really well with positive reinforcement. They don't do as well with negative reinforcement. That's why you give a dog a treat when it goes outside to shit instead of sits right down on your hardwood floor and shits. That's why you give a dog a treat when it doesn't bark at other dogs. That's why you give a dog a treat when it sits when you tell it to sit, because dogs do very well with positive reinforcement. The same is true for humans. The same is true for ourselves. So for these things that you're doing, taking that step, showing yourself that you can do that you can follow through, you can keep your promises to yourself. You create the evidence and the fact that it's possible for you. But then when you reinforce it with some sort of treat for yourself or reward for yourself in some sort of way, then you are creating a positive association inside of the subconscious mind that then tells your brain, oh, I want to do more of this. I want to keep going. I want to take more steps. It's so fun for me to be able to show myself what is possible for me and how I then get rewarded as a byproduct of that. I am a very firm believer that the more that we love and nurture ourselves through the process of choosing to do something, the more we're going to want to do them versus the approach of like discipline, hardship, just get over it, so on and so forth. Because that may be effective in the moment, but it's not a long lasting, sustainable approach, especially for women, especially for our nervous systems. We love the positive reinforcement. We love to be able to feel nourished within it. Anything that makes us feel like depleted or like we're not doing enough or disciplined or whatever. Yes, again, it may work in the short term, but ultimately long term, you're going to be like, fuck this shit. I don't want to do it. So, that is the thing that I think can be really helpful for the completion of taking that step is giving yourself a reward. And going back to that example of me paying off $70,000 worth of debt, the thing that I would do is with every single milestone that I hit in my debt-free journey is I would reward myself in some sort of way. I would either buy myself a new article of clothing or I would go out to a restaurant that I had really been wanting to go to. And then as greater and greater amounts of that debt was paid off, the rewards got greater and greater. So I then booked a really awesome Airbnb here in New York City to live in as I got to the end of the debt-free journey. And it was like, that was the goal. That was the aim for me of like, wow, if I can be almost debt-free or completely debt-free by the time that I move to New York City, then I have a bigger budget to be able to live in a place that I really want to live in. And that was what happened. I wasn't completely debt-free when I moved to New York City, but I was within 2 months of moving to New York City because I was so motivated by the rewards that I was getting from it and then from the energy and inspiration that I was receiving here that felt like such a reward itself. So that is something that I highly suggest if you're not already rewarding yourself for the milestones and the accomplishments that you are taking and making, but also with these ones that you have a lot of resistance towards. Don't reward yourself first, reward yourself afterwards. Make it fun, make it pleasurable at the beginning, but don't reward yourself before you take the action. That's a huge one. Next, and this is the thing that I know has gotten me over all of the resistance that I've had throughout every single step of this journey in manifesting a life greater than anything that I could have ever imagined, is the fact that I didn't do it alone. Because doing it alone is a surefire way to stick with old habits and behaviors that you have from the past that are creating the cycles that you do not want to be in now. And one thing, if y'all have listened to the podcast or if you know me, that I love to be 100% honest and transparent about is the fact that I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't be recording this if it wasn't for the fact that I have had guidance and mentors every single step of the way throughout my journey. I have been supported by people every single step of the way. There was only like I think 5 weeks at the beginning of my intentional manifestation journey that I didn't have a coach before I was like, fuck it. My time is so much more important to me because I can either use my time to try and figure this out on my own and it will maybe eventually get me to where I want to be, but in such a longer time period than me using my money, investing my money in receiving coaching, guidance, support, healing from other people that I admire and that I know have the tools and resources to help me to get to where I want to be so that I can be there quicker and make the money back. And that's hands down, I believe, one of the most powerful things that you can do to overcome the resistance that you have to starting or continuing on a path that you want to be on is having support in your corner who is there with you every single step of the process. And so for the example that I've been talking about with the debt that I was paying off, I didn't do any of that alone. I had an incredible life coach that I met with every single week who was supporting me, who was talking through conversations with me, who was helping me with my relationship to money, who was helping me with somatic healing and releasing traumas and all of these things that I was carrying that was creating so much more resistance to starting or expanding or going after the things that I wanted, that I genuinely believe I wouldn't have gotten to by myself. Because oftentimes when we've been in these patterns for such a long time, or there's a lack of awareness of how to overcome them, there's then this sense of discomfort and a lack of safety that takes over, that doesn't allow you to actually get as deep as you need to go to release the things that you need to release, to feel the safety that you're wanting to feel, to be able to then proceed and go and move and do it by yourself. Whereas now, for the past year, I haven't worked with a coach consistently. I've still worked with a coach, but it hasn't been on a consistent weekly basis. But for the first 4 years of my intentional manifestation journey, I worked with a coach almost every single week, if not multiple coaches at a time. And so I share that not to be like, join the Abundant AF Babe Academy right this moment. Although I would love that as well. I share that because there's a lot of false narratives out there surrounding what you need to do to overcome things on your own, when in reality, I don't believe that we're meant to overcome anything on our own. Humans weren't built to do that. We always have needed to live in community. We've always needed other people to be able to access the power that is inside of ourselves. And I also believe that from a spiritual standpoint. I believe that we experience God not only within ourselves, but within the people who are in our lives, and the way in which their light shines onto us and reflects the parts of ourselves that are currently in the darkness. And so having a coach, having a mentor, having somebody that you tune to and turn to is so helpful for you to actually get to where you're wanting to be and to overcome, again, that resistance to starting. You have a built-in buddy that's gonna see you through your goals. So I highly suggest, if you haven't worked with a coach, find somebody that you resonate with and pursue working with them in some sort of capacity. I know it can be really scary to invest in yourself, especially when you're like, well, money is the issue. Yes, and money will continue to be the issue if you don't have somebody who helps you overcome the challenges that you're experiencing and help you get to the other side. So again, if that's me, if that's the Abundant AF Babe Academy, I would absolutely love to have a conversation with you. And like I said, you can click the link down below in the show notes to check out what the Abundant AF Babe Academy is all about, and then also apply and have a conversation with me. But if that's not me, that's also 100% okay, because I want you to work with and be guided by the person who you feel the deepest connection to. That's how you're going to get the results that you want. If there's that sense of safety in the person that you are connecting with, then that's the person who's going to help you get the results that you want. And then lastly, one of the things that has helped me overcome massive resistance in my life is inviting God, inviting the universe, inviting the divine into the situation to help me release the resistance that is attached to it. And what I mean by this is that oftentimes, like I said earlier in the podcast, we have a very limited perception of our power, of what we're capable of what we're meant for, of how things can be done. And when you turn to prayer, when you turn to journaling, when you turn to meditation, when you turn to just having conversations with God, you are led to answers that you wouldn't have found on your own. And that's one of the coolest things that I've really seen so clearly for myself over the past few years of deepening my spiritual connection and really creating this deep relationship with God, is the fact that I ask for answers and the answers appear. I don't ask for the thing, because I'm a firm believer in the fact that if we have the answers, or if we have the belief or the mindset that can give us the thing, then we can be able to recreate it over and over and over again. Whereas a lot of times, again, taking the example of money, people will pray for money. And there's nothing wrong with praying for money. I want to get that straight real quick. There's nothing wrong with praying for money. But I'm a firm believer that if I pray on how do I develop the belief system of a millionaire, or guide me to the resources or the people or the mentor, whatever it is that will help me create that internal shift in my mind, body, and soul, then I will be able to continue to produce that over and over and over again, as opposed to have it be what otherwise might be a one time thing. So that's a little bit different of a conversation, but bringing in divine guidance, asking for the love, the guidance, the support of God, source, spirit, the universe, whatever you like to call it, and helping that ease the resistance and trusting that as you are asking for that support, as you're asking for that guidance, the divine is always going to take you down the path of least resistance and is always going to lead you to best case scenario for your life. So it ultimately then also helps with this deep sense of trust as well, which I think then taking all of these things and mixing them together, you have the perfect formula for overcoming that resistance to getting started and then continuing on to where you want to be. It's not just this, okay, this is me taking the first step formula. This is the formula to not only take that first step, but then keep going and going and going and going and building this rock solid foundation so that anything that you want to manifest on top of that then is sustained and you can have it in a long lasting way. Y'all also know, if you listen to the podcast or if you've been a part of my world for whatever time, I don't believe in manifesting things just for the sake of manifesting things. I believe in building a long lasting, sustainable foundation and having a long lasting, sustainable approach to your manifestations. Because if you do not have that, then eventually they crash and burn, they crumble, they go away. And I mean, maybe somebody sees a point in that, but I don't. So that's what I have on all of this. And I really hope that this podcast episode helped you with understanding how you could break down the resistance, how you can finally start to take those steps towards what it is that you want for yourself, because you deserve that. You deserve the life that you dream of. You deserve to have, be, and do whatever it is that you want for yourself. And that, my friend, starts with a step. Every single marathon starts with one single step. So go take that step. Whether it be any of the things that I talked about today, or maybe something else popped up for you as you're listening, go take that step, see where it leads you. And I am excited for where it does. That's all that I have for you. I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast episode. If you watched it, amazing. Thanks for watching this. If you listened to it, also amazing. Thank you for listening. I'm sending you all of my love, and I will chat with you on the next one.